Joining us now, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who has said Trump's troop deployments in his state are not legally justified. Attorney General, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's start with your reaction to the appeals court ruling.
Well, we're obviously pleased. We don't want the National Guard on our streets. The court's ruling denied a request for emergency administrative stay on deployment, which while they allowed for the federalization, they denied the deployment, which is the more important thing, that effectively the National Guard won't be on our streets. And I think it's important. I think Judge Perry, I spent some time late Friday and yesterday reading her opinion, and she goes back to the origin of this country, where our founders said it would be unimaginable, and it's inflammatory to suggest that a president would ever send the militia of one state into another. Well, we're here.
Mr. Attorney General, the reasoning that the president is using to do this in all of these cities is that there's this terrible crime. And sure, there's crime in cities, there's crime in towns and townships, little villages all across the country. That is a thing that we live with as human beings. But I want you to fact check a claim from President Trump this week, which is that 4,000 people were murdered in Chicago over a very short period of time. He said that on Friday. You tell me if I'm wrong. I think you know this better than I, but there were 331 homicides that have been recorded in this city in 2025 so far, and 2024 was the third consecutive year that homicides decreased. That's according to the city of Chicago. What is the president talking about? What are the 4,000 people who were murdered over a very short period of time in Chicago?
Well, the president does not have a good relationship or familiarity with the truth. While one homicide is one too many, the law enforcement on the local level, actually in partnership with federal law enforcement, FBI, DEA, ATF, has done a good job over the years of decreasing the number of homicides. And so the president's representation is just so far from the truth. It's important to note that Judge Perry, in making her decision, looked at credibility, and there were three things that were being alleged. One, that certain individuals were being violent towards DHS personnel, and charges were brought against those individuals, and grand juries declined to indict on those charges. And another thing that was alleged was that there was a request for National Guard to protect the courthouse, and the chief judge, federal judge, came out and said that that was not true, and they had to backtrack on that. And then finally, one of the leaders of ICE said that things were uncontrollable outside of the Broadview facility, yet that same individual had emailed the state police saying that local police were doing a great job of controlling things. So they just have bad relationship with the truth.
Mm-hmm. Attorney General, one of my biggest concerns with the Trump second term has always been the potential of him invoking the Insurrection Act. I've talked about this with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison multiple times, including yesterday on the show. And I'm bringing it up now because this past week, we have heard the President of the United States discuss it publicly. Watch this.
The Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. Yeah, well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple.
When I talked to A.G. Ellison back in May, he said, unprovoked, that invocation of the Insurrection Act was the ultimate goal of President Trump. And if that were to happen, that's the whole ball game. Do you share that same concern? And what, if anything, could you do as the Attorney General of Illinois to push back against something like that?
Well, the same thing that we did last week. We challenge it in court. One of the things, there is no insurrection. And similarly, there were three preconditions to federalizing the Guard. One, whether there was a foreign invasion. Two, whether there's a rebellion, which, tracks a little bit along with the notion of an insurrection. Mm-hmm. The lawyer for the federal government indicated that the president is above judicial review on his ability to federalize and deploy the Guard, and while the judge recognized that the president does get much deference, she said he's not entitled to his own facts, and so he's not entitled to just determine out of whole cloth that the conditions exist when they don't. The preconditions exist when they don't, and so the same thing would apply to the Insurrection Act.
Attorney General, the conditions might not exist, but we had former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson on the show yesterday, who said that while he doesn't agree with the tactics or the strategy being employed by the Trump administration here, he does think and predict that when this makes its way up to the Supreme Court, that they're going to uphold and authorize the president's actions here. If we end up in a situation where National Guard are in American cities for an undetermined amount of time, which is actually what's already happening in our city, in Washington, D.C., what will places like Chicago, what will you be doing? Well,
I mean, Chief Justice Roberts said to some Georgetown law students last May that the rule of law is under threat. And he, in the same speech, said that folks need to enhance their civics education. We have to rely on the people at that point. And we've been relying on the people much in Chicago right now. People have been out with their phones videotaping some of the outrageous acts coming from the hands of ICE and Border Patrol. And I think the American people at large disapprove of the tactics that have been being used. And, I'm hopeful. I think we have a pretty strong record if this is elevated to the Supreme Court. I would note that the Seventh Circuit, again yesterday, denied the request for a stay, and that's significant. This is First Circuit to do so.
We'll continue to follow this story because there's a lot more to come. Illinois Attorney General Raul, thank you so much for coming on The Weekend.